Well,
So good morning, everybody. Uh, Welcome to our Sunday sitting group. Thank you, Jack, for moving the flowers. So yeah, in between our heads, that everybody can see the flowers.
there you go.
I hope.
How's that?
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. Perfecto. We turn off notifications. They tend to come anyway, but most of them are off. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Insight LA Sunday morning sitting group. My name is Trudy, and I am here with my beloved husband, Jack. Uh, and oh, hi, Lenny is here from London. I see. And I don't know if my friend Nani was going to come. Oh, she's here too. I don't see her. Anyway, I'm really happy to see all of you and those of you I can see. And yeah, it's fine to keep your cameras off while we're meditating. I love it if you turn them on when we're doing the talking part so I can see you. And we will begin with a meditation. I do a little bit of guidance, and maybe Jack will chime in, but mostly we sit in silence these days. It's really one of the few times that we get to really to sort of mute the external voices and just be with ourselves and the sounds of life around us and all of that. And Camille is moderating today. Where are you? Thank you so much for that. Yes, thank you for volunteering to do that. And people are still coming in. But I think we'll start. Oh, and today I'm starting a two-part series about intuition. And Jack Jack is spontaneously joining today, which is really a treat for us, for all of us, for me especially. And I'm speaking to you, we are speaking to you today from the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok indigenous people, 12 tribes who populated this whole area around the Bay Area, Marin County, before any white people arrived. So I want to acknowledge those who were the guardians of this land for thousands of years before us. And so let's begin. Find just a framework for your body that feels comfortable for you, where you can sit for approximately a half hour. For those of you who may be new to Inside LA, anybody new to Inside LA that I can see? If you're new, we divide the time roughly into thirds where we meditate and then have some teaching and then some chance for dialogue with each other. And we say sitting group and we say let's sit together because for decades we have used that word, but I'm also very aware that not everybody sits. Some people may stand, some people may lie down, depending on the condition of your back and your body. This bell has a wonderful long sound. So you can begin the meditation by just listening to the sound of the bell until its vanishing point. So we begin by taking 3 deep cleansing breaths. A deep breath in and releasing. And once again, breathing in all the way down into the belly. And relaxing. Breathing in the aliveness of the moment. And breathing out any tension, relaxing into the body. Just sensing and feeling the movement of the breath in the body. The sounds of life around you, hearing. And relaxing into awareness of the flow of thoughts and feelings. The dance of sensations as we sit still.
One voice is enough.
Just allowing yourself to relax into the body. Just dropping, as if dropping underneath the thinking mind, thinking its thoughts, feeling feelings, just resting in this quiet presence with it all. And just offering some appreciation for your willingness to be with the feelings and thoughts, the kindness of attending to what's happening, how it is for you in this particular moment of life. And during the last 5 minutes of this meditation, I want to invite you to just do an experiment. You can just keep doing your practice, or you can do this just to connect with certain feelings. And using the imagination, just imagine yourself immersed in doing something that you really enjoy. Just for a moment, noticing how you feel and where you feel that enjoyment or energy in your body. And just noticing this is how it feels to feel joy, to feel good, positive energy, of something pleasant and pleasurable for you. And now, again, using your imagination, just imagine doing something that actually is very draining for you, just saps your energy and makes you feel kind of tired and empty. And again, noticing how this feels and where you sense and feel this in your body. And now imagine doing something that's kind of scary, not terrifying or anything, but just something that maybe your intellect, your mind says, no, don't go there. But you have a sense that you still should do it, or you are called to do it. And again, just noticing what you're feeling and where in your body you feel this. Again, just something that's maybe somewhat daunting or unfamiliar. And the mind is saying, no, 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 don't go there. But you have a deeper sense of being called to do this. And what does that feel like? And again, just appreciating that by doing this, it's actually practicing creating space for intuitive feelings to be felt and known and recognized. So thank you, everybody. And and thank you for those of you who did that little exercise. Um, I'm really very overjoyed that uh, my old dear friend Nani is here today, because I really learned from Nani many years ago a way of training my own intuition. Maybe you've noticed in your life that anytime you override your gut feelings, that instinct about where you need to go, because it doesn't feel logical or doesn't make sense or it seems a little scary. I don't know about you, but in my life, every single time I override my intuition, it's a disaster. Something happens that is really um, not what I would have liked to have happen, not the way I would have liked to go. So I want to do this couple of couple of Sundays anyway, exploring the realm of intuition. In Buddhism, there's a word prajna. It's prajna in Sanskrit and panya in Pali, and it's translated as wisdom, but it really is referring to this intuitive wisdom that 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 we're looking at and that I want to talk about. It's not the wisdom of knowing lots of things or having even a long experience of life, except that having a long experience of life generally helps with one's intuitive knowing. So that's what I really want to explore, because it's such a huge part of that inner voice or inner guidance that we all long for. And I see it in myself, maybe not so much these days, but certainly for a lot of my life. And I see it in my granddaughter. When she has to make a big decision, she starts polling everybody, her friends, her grandmother, her parents, her dog, her kittens. She starts polling everybody, right? Trying to figure out which way to go. And we do this in our different ways. But it's so paradoxical, because it actually prevents you from hearing your own inner voice. Um, and sometimes we need help. That's why we do these practices together in community and can turn to each other. But I want to tell you a story. It's a beautiful story. I've shortened it somewhat. It's a long story, actually, but it's from a teacher from the Insight Meditation Society's teacher training, who is of indigenous heritage. Jean Corrigal tells this story. So here we go. Buddhist practice and indigenous wisdom share a similar invitation into an embodied way of knowing. One of my heart stories demonstrates this wisdom. It's about Jim Seti, a Métis elder who was beloved across central Saskatchewan as a historian, storyteller, guide, and tracker. Jim was known as the best tracker across the whole territory. Whenever anyone was lost in the national park, they could contact Jim and he would help. Years ago, a young boy was lost. Jim was off that day, so they called my dad, who worked with Jim. And Dad called everybody together and they started to look for this little boy. Normally, they could find somebody in an hour, but this day they looked and they could not find the lost boy. So they had to leave him in the bush all night by himself. The next morning, they started looking again. They looked and again, they could not find the boy. So they had to leave him in the bush all by himself for another night. And the next morning, they started looking again until about noon. And at this point, they were desperate because they really didn't know if he could survive another night in the bush. So they decided they needed Jim. So they went to his phone, they went to his home because they didn't have cell phones yet. They went to his home on Fish Lake Settlement, and Jim came and said to my dad, "Show me where that boy was last seen." So my dad showed him the spot where the boy was last seen by the lake, and Dad said, "Jim just stood on that spot. He got really quiet and really still. And everybody around him, the whole search team, got really quiet. And Jim stood there, surrounded by all the ground that had been completely trampled by the whole search team because they'd been wandering around looking for 3 days already. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, Jim started walking real fast into the bush, and Dad was following behind. And Jim tracked really fast through 6 miles of muskeg and bush, and then Dad saw him stop, and the boy was right there in front of him. Dad said he and the other trackers did not understand how he did it. And this is a story I grew up on, and this is Jean speaking, not me. This is a story that I grew up on as a child. I would think,
Thank you, Slaughter.
oops, Robert, yeah, mute yourself, thanks. And this is a story I grew up on as a child, and I would think if I'm ever lost, Jim would find me. Years later, I was speaking in my hometown.
He was.
Oh, thank you. Years later, he was speaking she's a teacher too. He was speaking in my hometown about First Nation and Métis history. And I, Jeannie, went to hear him speak. I went up to him and said, "Mr. Settee, you won't remember me, but I'm one of Andy and Dorothy's daughters." He took my hand into both of his hands. He leaned toward me with a little twinkle in his eye. And he said, "Are you Jean?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I remember you. I remember you sleeping in a basket on the porch of your parents' cabin. And we were all working around and you just slept and slept." In that moment, I understood why so many people loved him. Because every time you spoke with him, he gave you a piece of yourself. He helped you come home in a way. And after that, I started to visit Jim. I asked him, "Mr. Settee, how did you find that boy?" He said, "When I look for any lost person, I put myself into the mind of the person who's lost, and that helps me pick up their trail more easily." I said, "What did you do when you found that particular boy?" "That boy was out of his mind with fear," he said. "He couldn't talk, he couldn't walk. I just sat down beside him for half an hour until he could come back inside himself, inside his body. And then we walked out of the bush together." And this story is actually the story of our meditation practice. Sometimes we're the boy who's lost in reactivity, in our mind. And up here in Canada, we say you get bush panic when you're lost and you start getting tighter and more caught. And sometimes we're the searchers, the people searching as hard as they can. Sometimes, she says, Jim Seti is in me. And just like mindfulness always remembers us, that sense of Jim Seti is always there too. And when we turn to it, it's always there. This is our intuition. When I can remember that and put myself into my own mind, when I'm the lost boy, I can pick up the trail more easily. And when I'm caught somewhere, paralyzed by fear, self-judgment, or any number of lost states, I remember the story. And I remember that Jim Seti just sat with that boy in kindness until that boy could come back inside his own body. Sometimes when we're really out of our bodies and lost, we can call in this great kindness. And at that moment, we're home. This story has been a real guide for Jean, and I loved this story and felt it could be a real guide for us in our practice here today. She goes on to say it's a pause, an intuitive listening, which helps us to simply know what's happening. And if we can have this relationship of wisdom and kindness with whatever's happening, this can lead us home. So I have some practical pointers for how we can tune into this sense of coming enough home into our own bodies that we can sense and feel the intuitive calling. And I'm just going to say that getting to know your feelings, exploring, sensing, the feelings like we did during the last 5 minutes of the meditation, that's really the first step, because then you can use your feelings as guidance. I can use my feelings as guidance because when I need to make a decision, I tune into my body and recognize the feelings of lightness, of pleasure, of going in that and go in that direction. I can recognize the feelings of being bored or drained or having some kind of unnameable sense of dread and not go in that direction. And I'm going to say more about this next week and also share some of the simple things I learned from my friend Nani. But today, since Jack is here, I would like to make room for you to, yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to share this class with my beloved here. It's great. Good to see you all. And I'm listening to you, Trudy, and recognizing that what you're speaking about is so central to what we call insight meditation or vipassana, mindfulness practice, what we've all been doing. In the traditional text, it said there are 3 kinds of knowing. Suttamaya Panya, which is the knowing that comes from studying the texts and reading things that were taught in past generations. And then there's Chintamaya Panya, which is the understanding that comes from reflection and thinking, which has its value. And then there's Bhavanamaya Panya, which is the intuitive, direct knowing for yourself, which is what you were talking about, Trudy, in some way. And insight meditation then is an invitation to quiet the mind, tend to the heart, listen more deeply. And it's also an invitation to recognize that what our teacher, when Trudy and I met in 1973 or around that time with this great Korean Zen master, Seung-san, Daesan Senim, sometimes people would be asking him these Zen questions and go into Zen koans and Dharma combat. I like that. I always lost, but it was still fun to do. And people would ask him questions and he would respond. And one of his responses, he would look at people And he would pause and he'd say, "You already understand. You already know." We were looking outside ourselves, and yet in that very simple response, he would say, "You know, you already know." So when we meditate, the point isn't to have a particular experience, all kinds of experiences, joy and sorrow and opening and closing, all those things happen because we're human and we're alive. The point is to become present and a little bit quiet, like Jim Seti did as he stood deeply quiet, and begin to listen. What does our body, as Trudy said, what does our body want us to know right now? Even as I speak with you, if you get quiet and listen, tune into this amazing human body that you inhabit. It has a message for you this very day. What does your body want you to remember? You can know. And in the same quiet, you can listen to the heart of longing and ease and fear and hope and graciousness and anger and all the different emotions that make up the heart. It carries so much. And you can ask your heart, even as we sit together now quietly, what does my heart want to remind me of? What does my heart want me to remember that's really important this day, this moment? And the beautiful thing is, as you listen, the heart will speak. You can know. What it asks of us is to step out of the busyness of our lives as we do in meditation, settle ourselves down in our bodies and hearts, let the mind begin to quiet, and let this intuitive knowing, the bhavana maya panya, the wisdom intuition, speak to us. And it can take us very deep. Insight meditation is the insight into the ways that we as human beings cause suffering to ourselves and one another, and the insights in a single moment of how we can free ourselves, free the heart from our fears and attachments and confusion. Not that they won't be there, but to step back into the loving awareness, the mindful, loving awareness that witnesses it all and knows who we really are, which is not the things we're caught up in, but we're the consciousness, the witness itself, the understanding. And even though an amazing elder and tracker like Jim Seti has this ability to sense and feel and know, we all have it. It's buried somewhat, this mystery. I sometimes in my teaching will tell the stories of how I've known about people who I love or care about, how I've known just when they died, even though I was at some distance. I think of my sister-in-law who I was going to go visit. She was quite sick, and I was on my way there, and I was in the drugstore picking some things up and trying to hurry to get back. And all of a sudden my whole body relaxed. And I said, "Oh, Esther died." And I got out to my car and called my brother, and he said, "Oh yeah, Esther died 5 minutes ago." And I said, I know. And then I'll be in a group and I'll say, and I've known this across the world. I could be in India or Asia, and there are moments when I know things, and you do too. And I'll ask in a group, how many people have had this kind of intuitive knowing about something important happening to someone you know, they're dying or some other thing? And a third of the hands go up, at least, because it's part of who we are. We actually are connected in this mystery. And quieting allows us to tune in. And as Trudy was inviting, then we can see more with the eyes of compassion, or the eyes of the awakened ones, or the eyes of the Buddha. You can picture yourself in the worst difficulties that you get into sometimes, the conflicts and the struggles, and quiet and step back. And well, what would Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion, do in this situation? What would a Buddha, an awakened one, a wise one, do in this situation? And you listen, and it's there. You already know because it's part of you. Now I'll tell one more little story and then we can do some dialogue. I was flying from the East Coast back to the Bay Area some years ago and struck up a conversation with my seatmate, the woman who sat next to me. And when I'm on the plane, it's fun, you can sit quietly. And sometimes I just sit and do metta for all the people on the plane for a few minutes, and for that young girl over there and that teenage, that grandmother and that person. And pretty soon I feel like they're part of my family. I'm connected. I wish them well. And it takes 2 minutes to do a little loving kindness, so that when the plane lands, I could almost say bye to everybody. We did this together. And I was sitting there and we started a conversation, and sometimes people ask, what do I do? And if I'm feeling playful, I might say, well, I'm in sales, or I might say I'm in theater, which is also partly true. Anyway, it turned out her name was Elizabeth Mayer. She was a professor at the University of California at Berkeley in psychology. And we started talking about intuition, and she said, I'm part of this musical group, the Christmas Revels, and my 12-year-old daughter plays the harp. And we bought for her this magical instrument, $10,000, $15,000, this amazing old harp. And she loves playing it. And it was stored in a room where we were having our performances, and someone broke in and stole it. And she was absolutely stricken and heartbroken. And we did everything we could. You go to the police and they say, what, a harp is missing? It's not like it's, that easy for them to find. We tried everything, nothing. And my mother kept saying, you have to talk to my dowser. Now, a dowser, if you don't know, is a person who finds underground water with a divided stick, and somehow can walk around and sense where you should dig the well, among other things. But basically, a dowser, like Jim Seti, is a finder, is someone who knows things through that intuitive sense. And she kept putting her mother up, but it didn't happen. Finally, she said, all right, I'll call your guy, which she did. And he said, send me a picture, tell me the description, blah, blah, blah. 3 days later, she got a message. This is all described in a book she wrote called Extraordinary Knowing. She got a message, and he said, it's around 53rd Street and Broadway in Oakland, within a block of there. Now, this is crazy. Somebody, in Vermont or wherever he was, and then Virginia, says it's around 53rd Street and Broadway. But she had no better information. So she made a flyer with a picture of the harp and said, $1,000 reward, no questions asked. Meet in the parking lot of Safeway on Sunday morning. And she drove there with her van Sunday morning. And there, with the van, had the picture of the harp on the side. And sure enough, a van pulled up and somebody got out and said, "You're looking for a musical instrument?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Yeah, for $1,000, I think I can help you." And she gave him the money, and he opened the van, and there was the harp. Yes, you can look at her book, Extraordinary Knowing, but you don't have to, because what this story points to is that we're woven together in a mystery of consciousness. We are. How could I know someone dies when I'm not there? How could you know this? And how could you know, if you take the time and listen, what it is your heart really wants to remind you of, or your body, that we get too busy to pay attention to listen to? And so the invitation of the stories, the one of Jim Sati, which I find so inspiring, not just touches our hearts, touch my heart, but says, let's live in mystery. Let's live in listening in a deep way to ourselves, to this earth which so badly needs it, to one another in a wiser way. Because when people are upset and angry and divisive and so forth, underneath, you can feel, if you listen deeply, their fears, their pains. And when we listen to ourselves and one another and the world around us in this way, there's a kind of liberation and well-being and freedom that's possible. And this is partly the great gift of our practice. So, my dear.
Thank you, Chad.
Shall we listen to these folks and see what they have to say?
Yeah, so this is, of course, your turn. And if you would like to share, I don't know, a story or questions that you might have about your meditation practice or anything on these lines, just, put the, raise your hand. You can use the reaction button to raise your hand, the raise hand function, or you can just wave wildly. The group's not so huge that Camille can't see you. And yeah, and one of us will respond. We call this Q&R, questions and responses, because we don't have the all the knowledge. This is actually a place where you're deepening your own trust in your knowing. So it's your turn. I'm going to look in the chat. And by the way, if you have something you'd like to say, but you don't really want to say it in front of everybody out loud, you can always put it in the chat, because we are definitely chat positive here in this group. And so there is actually, I'm going to start because there is a remark in the chat, which is about intuition. Before you wrote, I'm just going to do this one. And the question is, how do you distinguish? And this is, of course, the hugest question that you're asking. It's really the perennial question about intuition. How can I tell when it's my intuition speaking or my fear? And this question is specifically about somebody recognizing or accepting if the relationship is over. So, of course, that's a scary idea when you're in a relationship and you're connected and attached, well attached to somebody. The idea that the relationship is over can be really frightening and devastating. So how to know when a feeling like that is actually just the fear, or if there is some substance to it? Do you want to say something? I can, but
go ahead, please.
Yeah. So sometimes it is just really hard to know. That's the first thing, because feelings are strong and they can come up in reaction when it's unwise, or they could be a sign of wisdom. And sometimes it's just hard to know. But I would also say that if a feeling, say, about the end of a relationship is coming up repeatedly and it's associated with fear, then I would ask myself about my history and knowing myself. is this a fear that is based on things that have happened in the past that I may be carrying forward into this relationship? Or am I intuiting something about this relationship that's not working for us, for perhaps either of us, if I'm honest with myself? And that's the inquiry that I would do in this case.